Hi, this is Pamela Worth with Hello Health, and today I have Dr. Pat, who is a high performance mastery mentor coach, functional medicine doctor, lifestyle strategist, and international bestselling author. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, I appreciate it. It's been, I've been looking forward to this and hanging out with you and sharing some great information and uplifting a lot of lives.
Absolutely. So, a lot of what we do is we want to help people understand what they can do and think about and ask questions about when it comes to functional health. So, tell us a little bit about you and your practice and some of the things that you do as a mentor, a coach, a doctor, also CEO and founder of Health Team Network.
Well, I do more than just that, but if that isn't enough, one of the things that has always driven me and is that I'm very solution driven. And so in knowing where like I come from in that, and I've been like this my whole entire life. I came out of the chute, solving problems. When I played doctor, I never was the nurse, and no one died under my auspices. And even when I had my active practice years ago, it was very productive, very positive. People got well, people referred a lot of people, and I had a big faith in the community of where I was at. I did a lot of outside talking. And so when I sold my business, I moved to Boston where nobody knew me. It was great. And but I walked around, and the biggest thing that I saw in Boston was I saw a lot of sick people and people who were sick and they didn't know it. And so, or like nobody home, and like so stressed. And it's just, and I wasn't working then because I took time off after I sold my business. And what got me motivated is I was reading a article one day from that was put out by the CDC, because I was already into wellness by then. And I was already, I did my whole chiropractic career and adjusting people wasn't just an adjustment. Like I don't serve adjustments, I serve longevity, and I serve happiness. And so in that piece of that, in teaching people that transition, it was a big major paradigm shift for a lot of people to have that mindset of like, I want to be healthy, how do I do it? And it's just like, can you tell me how to do it? Because no one ever taught me before. So I taught people how to eat. I taught people how to do detoxes that promoted tonification of your body and not depleted it, and purging, everything out of you, because that's not necessarily your health and wellness. And so when I put, when I sold my business and went up there, I started doing in Boston, I started doing, private coaching. And I called it coaching. Nobody called it coaching then. It was all, they were consultants, but I called myself a coach. And and I saw these, like I said, just said I saw a lot of people who weren't well and they didn't know it. And so it was really great to be undercover, incognito, in a scenario where I could ask people any question because they never asked me what I did. I asked people, are you a person or are you a human being? And I only had one person once who said yes. And I said, you must be a medical doctor. He goes, how did you know? And I said, because you guys, it's just like there has to be this like, edginess about them because they can't get too close. Whereas in alternative and holistic medicine, you hug everybody, and it's just like, and that touchy feely part of that, is, in a very like clean way, helps people get even better because some people never, no one ever touches them, and so when you're delivering a chiropractic adjustment, your hands are on someone's, body, on their back, and or you're doing like functional movement with them and teaching that. If you have different, depends on your certification. I'm a certified sports physician. So if I'm dealing with the pro volleyball games that I used to do in the summer, it's just like I'm helping people like, get that major stretch so they have more bounce to the ounce and they can get that ball and spike it, over on the other side of the net. And so I decided when I was up there, I really wanted to do more coaching because I thought that I could impact people's lives on a deeper level, and like, sit with them like, why are you sick? Why are you fat and why are you tired? So that's how that book came about, that shows people, where they're, to spend their time, their energy, and their resources, discovering like, what can I do to fix that? There's 11 organ systems, and those 11 organ systems got to work together. It isn't like one thing. It isn't like cardiovascular, like they try to tell you in medicine, and you have a specialist for this and a specialist for this. All those organ systems have got to communicate with each other. So it's really important to create that foundational base and the basics of health. And a lot of people don't know what health is, and they don't know why they get sick, and they don't know how to make, understand how all those organ systems work together. But, in the book, Why Are You Sick, Fat, and Tired, which is a 2-time best-selling, international best-selling book, it's a book of questions that lead you in the direction of self-discovery and highlighting and elevating your awareness about your health, because you have to have health and you have to have the mindset in order to be healthy. In order to have they go together. They're the foundational step to anything you want to do in your life.
For sure. So when you are asking people questions, talk to us a little bit about some of the questions and the path you're taking people down so you can start to uncover what's causing some of these symptoms they're feeling.
Well, when I coach, I can think of one particular person, a case, I'll give this as a case study. And this woman had this red mark. I was working in someone else's office, and I said, "Where'd you get that mark from? Has that been there your whole life?" Because I thought it might be a birth defect or, um, you know, like something, like where did that come from? And so she was American Japanese. She was knock dead gorgeous, and it's just like she became more insightful and more powerful. But she said she didn't know. She remembered it being smaller, but she didn't remember it ever getting bigger. And then suddenly it was bigger. And so it's like, because we don't pay attention to things that are so familiar to us, only when they become like in your face and it's a crisis for you, And so I asked her, we started working together. And and we're looking at her diet, and we're looking at like, how she was eating, because she was always tired. She had gluten sensitivity, not she wasn't celiac, so she was gluten sensitive, and she had all this stuff, like these things going on, and she gave up, she didn't drink, and she did like, she was like doing cleanse portion of her life, like she was reassessing that. And so at one point in time, she said she got on a call with me, and she was just like, said, "What's going on? You seem really agitated." And she goes, "My brother's here from Japan." And so I said to her, "So tell me about it." And so we were going to talk about something totally different that day. We're going to talk about like, how to incorporate, how to really visually just judge, when you're eating food, like what should I eat? If I'm at a smorgasbord, what should I eat? How to pick the things that are really, really healthy for you, and what to stay away from. And I said, forget about that. I said, let's talk about the emotional component today. And so we did that. And then like what came out of it is this whole family dynamic and major dysfunctional family piece with her mother and her sister and her brother and her father. And she was always her father's favorite. So there's like when they all got together, there was that media tension. And at one point in time, I was asking her, some personal questions, and without disclosing really what those personal questions were, I just said to her, she was just really edgy. And I said, "So who do I remind you of now?" And there's dead silence. And I said, "Well, I either remind you of your mother or your father." I said, "So which one do I remind you of?" And she was "My father." And I said, "I don't care if you hate me, and I said, I'm on your side. And I said, but if we don't get through this, then you're going to be stuck. And
So, so
so
are you
the
saying
interest,
that a lot of your functional health and wellness treatment is more around feelings and talking therapy,
well,
or is
it's as a part of it, because you have physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and you got to decide, like when you're talking, like where that balance is, like some days, like if you're talking about health or mindset, some days, it's like it should be in balance. Let's say it should be 50-50, 60-40, but it's ever perpetuating, going slightly up or going down. But if you don't have a robust mindset, you're never going to have a robust health, because the mindset, like it's the lizard brain, the mammalian brain, and the conscious brain always arguing with each other.
Mhm.
And when you do that, you're in soup. You don't like the soup is sitting there stewing, as opposed to being eaten. And so when you have like the conscious brain saying, like I am healthy, vital, active, successful human being as an affirmation, then you have a million brain going, oh yeah, I like that, and the lizard brain's going, oh, you'll never succeed at that. This is like, it's like you keep on playing these same roles over and over again. You wonder why you don't get any place. Well, those emotions are remembered, are in the mammalian brain, and everything that's happened to you in your life is in the mammalian brain. And it talks to the lizard brain all the time, and it talks to the conscious brain, or the conscious brain talks to it, and it's in communication with it. But in order for it to change the message that you're getting so you can elevate and you can be better and you're healthier, those affirmations, go into mammalian brain. And then when something comes up, again and again, then what happens is that, it tells it like, oh no, that can't happen. And you're doing affirmations, so there's this, like it's almost like having mixed messages, and deciding. But when the mammalian brain actually registers a positive experience, then that positive experience is there. So it can say to the lizard brain, you're wrong, and you can listen to, it's better information. That's how they do marketing. It's the holy grail of marketing. They take you from your pain point and they take you to a positive experience. And when you register that in the mammalian brain, it happens over and over again, much more frequently. And for her, that's what happened. And so that her realization, it was like this aha moment about the dynamics of her family, and that it can happen around her. She doesn't have to absorb that energy or absorb that experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you keep kind of touching on lizard brain, but I'm not sure that a lot of people understand what that means. Do you want to touch on that for a minute?
No problem. You have three brains primarily. One's your primitive brain, one's your mammalian brain, and one's your conscious brain. Primitive brain is what you're born with. It is like the fight or flight. It's like when the saber-toothed tiger jumps in front of you, the guy who pulls directly in front of your car and you slam on the brakes. It's just like it's the one that, that's how people replicate themselves, because it's about fornication, it's about feeding yourself. Those, like all those basic needs that, that we have as human beings, that's the lizard brain. It's the one that has the message like, you can't, or you heard it when you were young and your parents were arguing about money. And so the when you're arguing about money, you're going, oh, I'm not good enough, or like, I can't have money. And, and that, then you create that stress. There's a book called The Big Leap by, I think his name is Gail. I have to think Gail Frederick or something like that, but it's called The Big Leap. And he talks about how people, take on these things that they hear at a young age, and then they act as if that's real and that's the same message, and you hear over and over again. So, like, you have parents who argue about money, you like keep on hitting the ceiling or the wall, and you're thinking, why can't I get a better job? Every time I get a better job, I get fired, or I change jobs. It's not the job for me. Um, it's those messages that we repeat like over and over again. And what I find, and that there's a technique in chiropractic called NET, and it's called neuro emotional tracing. That's what it was originally called. When I took it, that's what it was called. And what the technique does is it takes a look at something that might have happened to you, and you store it someplace in your body. I had one of the top three OBGYN people in Boston was my OBGYN doctor, and I used to refer patients up to her all the time. And one of my patients came back and she said, I realized something. And she said, every time I have a yeast infection, I just got done getting in a big fight with my husband. And the relationship to those things that happen in our environment affect us physically, or how we choose to let them affect us physically, because we don't have to, we can choose how to react to something, and whether or not to take it on or not. Kind of a convoluted, part of that experience, but it happens so with us, it happens to everybody.
So it sounds like when you're working with people, one of the first things you do is delve into the symptoms you're having and then delve into some of the experiences or the um, feelings
Right.
behind.
I look at where somebody wants to go. Like, what is it that you want, Pamela, for your health? And you tell me, it's just like, I'm just like, I'm tired all the time. It's just like, I'm fatigued and I can't think. And I wake up totally like right side, left side. I feel blonde every day, when I get up and I don't feel like eating. And it's just like, if I don't have coffee, then, and you get into this hamster, wheel cycle thing. It's just like, so what is it that you want to do? So in doing that, sometimes what you think you have is not necessarily what you have, because we can have a lot of signs and symptoms that funnel down and mean something else. And so if you ever open up the Merck's, I always call it the dictionary of disease, but it's called Merck's manual. It's just like there's so many things that are on, that can be like 10 other different things. So it's having that, like, and funneling things down, like you do, like what's the first thing that we have to deal with? I mean, you don't, like, look at babies; they don't just get up and walk. It takes them 2 years to like start to terrorize you. And, but when they first, like, from the time they get out, they're moving their head, they're perpetually exercising. When we sit, and even kids that are in kindergarten, and also in school, in grade school, they have recess to go out and move around and play. There was always recognized that you need to have that movement, for that. It's when you get into adulthood that you sit down and you're no longer doing that, and your muscles lose its memory for the tonicity portion of it. So it's just like, where's the weak link? You got to figure out what the weak link is, because if you don't know what the weak link, and you're treating or talking about something else, then, it's just like it can take you a lot longer to get to your desired goal, and I help people get to their goals in a lot less time, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, or even financial, so that they can get through the rhetoric, and do it in a more simple, safer, and in a very speedier solution, without harm, without drugs, in order to do it. Sometimes you need drugs, sure. I mean, sometimes there's emergency cases, but the idea is not to take something forever. Even Dr. Mayo of Mayo Clinic, used to say that, some drugs are poison in the same dose for the person sitting next to you. And so
So,
it's just like, how do you do, like, in most pharmaceutical drugs are based upon a person who weighs 150, at least it used to. When people, the average, what you're looking at, what the average weight is for dosage, and that's how they dose people. And it's like, it's not like if you weigh 200 pounds, it's just like you're still taking the prescription for someone who's 150 in the old fashioned way. I don't know what the number is now, to be quite honest, but that's what it was at one point in time.
so what about follow-up testing to ensure that someone is making progress? Tell
Well, they're
us a little.
talking to me, number one, all the time. And number two, like I have two questionnaires that I give out. There's one in my book. My people who get my book, it's a book of questions, and there's some, directions in the beginning that make sense to, like, in leading into it, have the opportunity to speak with me for a half hour for free. And so when they do that, we look at what the pattern is, and so, like when you have tires, and you have tires that are so long, like they have a pattern of wear or tear. Our bodies have the same thing, whether it's all those, stages: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and even financial. So when working with somebody, and doing those, you repeat those tests because you want to see where you're at from, now and then going in the future. And so when I've had people who repeat them, because a lot of people go like, I don't really see the change, like, or see some change. A lot of times it's very subtle, and until they go back to repeat the questionnaire or the assessment, all of them are science based, as a bottom line. But they don't realize, they're going like, when I was taking that again, I realized I don't have the symptom anymore. And someone told me today that they were, that I saw in the clinic that I'm working in, because I'm back in practice part-time in Lansing, New York. Um, the, they said, all of a sudden I went and had this, like, this treatment done that I recommended her that someone does. And she said, and I all of a sudden she goes, I didn't have, I 2 days later I realized I didn't have any pain, and but I don't know when it stopped. If I had to put my finger on when it stopped, she goes, 2 days later I didn't have the pain that I had. It shifted and it changed. And that happens for a lot of people because it's just like if you are look at the example of women giving birth. I mean, my niece, my favorite niece, said to me, um, after she had her first kid, she goes, I'm never doing this again. Never. And did she? No, she had another one. And but it's just like a lot of women wouldn't do that again. Your body forgets those things because it wants to subdue it because it always is looking at how you're handling survival,
Mhm.
and how you're moving forward.
So what sort of treatments do you suggest for people that are thinking about things emotionally or through a detox or through nutrition or through movement?
Well, it depends upon what they want to do because some people don't have the body type to do specific, like running a marathon. If you're 200 pounds and you're 5'4", probably isn't the thing for your body that to elevate the functionality of it. And so if you're looking at, you like, wanting to lose weight, some people, genetically speaking, have a gene that they're from their ancestors that got passed to them that, keep their body more robust because they're always in there because their ancestors were living in Northern Europe and it was always fight or flight, and the winters were harsh. So they were bigger, stockier people. I mean, you can see that when you go when you're in England, generally speaking, just the kind of prototype generally speaking, not specifically speaking, but you know, that prototype. I had, a boyfriend that was very rounded, like more barrely, and his ancestors, brothers just liked it, and the sisters liked it too, the two. So, but their gene pool goes back so far that how it expresses itself when it hits a certain epigenetic environment. You know, you have to look at that and like like what is it like? How do we get you past that point? So there's things that are solutions for that, but they're really individualized. And a lot of things I do with people are very individualized. I never ever tell anyone to do anything I wouldn't do myself or I have done or have not done myself. So that's like one of the what makes me different from a lot of doctors. If something doesn't make sense to me, I don't vote for it, at all. And so knowing that, you have to know your bottom line and you have to know what your foundation looks like and if there's any cracks in it. And you first need to fix the cracks. You got to fix your foundation before you elevate.
So
You've got
again,
to be
going back
prepared.
to detox and certain movements and things, do you have any favorites that you like to potentially talk with people about?
Well, it's for a movement, when people tell me, a lot of people tell me they don't like to exercise. And I said, do you like to walk? Can you walk? And the answer usually is yes. So I always say, go take a walk and walk as fast as you can, as far as you can, for as long as you can. Right? That's easy movement, and like move your body into it. But watch your posture. If you're in a gym, make sure you're looking at the mirror because a lot of people have a tendency to look down. And if you exercise your body in a distortion, the distortion gets stronger, it doesn't get better. And so when you're looking at, like doing detoxification, you got to look at, well, what foods am I eating, that, promote inflammation? If you're eating sugar, you're promoting inflammation. If you're eating sugar, you're promoting the fatty liver. And fatty liver always precedes pre-diabetes and also diabetic diagnosis. So it's like that's their insulin resistance. And so you have, looking at what a pattern is, like foods to stay away from. So the biggest culprit that you could stay away from is sugar. And sugar comes in anything that says OL at the end. It might not say alcohol, or it might not say like glucose, like OSE, dextrose, maltodextrin. You know, those are sugars. They're a form of sugar, sorbitol, which is a fake sugar. And they have found that people who like have used the what I call fake sugars, have more difficult time losing weight. And, it's just like, it's like eating real food would be, a good thing. How to put your food together, is important. And how much protein you need to sustain your muscle mass in your body is important. So it's very individualized upon a person's, upon their weight, their waist size, their hip size for women. For men, it's their wrist, and there's measurements, and metrics to be able to figure those things out. If you're doing blood work, you want to do A1C because you want to see what's happening with your blood sugar. I even think that, the opportunity, excuse me, opportunity to have, a glucose monitor, even if you don't feel like you need it, it's a good thing to do because it shows you how much food, interacts with your body chemistry. And if you know that, and you know that when you eat, like bread or something like that, like a sandwich, that your glucose levels go really high. But if you have, like a Caesar salad with chicken on it, it doesn't, it sustains. And so, like, then you learn how to, like, what foods are good for you and what foods are bad for you in a very simplistic way. So I think that glucose monitoring, and why is it, in the United States, we have the highest glucose issues in the world, and probably next is Italy because they have, they have a high level of diabetes in Italy for years. But but in the United States, we have, we're 30, like we might be that mighty nation, but we also have this, we're one of the sickest nations also too. We're not as healthy as we should be. And we also have a government that doesn't really curtail what the ingredients are in our foods. I always use the example of Heinz ketchup. It only has 8 ingredients in England, but in the United States, there's like a list. It is a long list, and there's things that are like, banned. I look when I choose to eat things, I look at to see whether or not I go, it's banned in Europe. Because if it's banned in Europe, I don't eat it. They're much stricter and they care much more about their people than the government here in the United States for the FDA. And the FDA and the, Congress, and the big pharma, they're all in bed with each other. One strokes the other's palm. And, just look at the example of that too. It's like, when they put a Spiritim out, Spiritim, Spiritim's probably really, it is not probably, it is pretty bad for you. But they changed the name of it. That's something to be aware of too. It's like it's just like whether all the names for asparagus, go look it up on AI, and it's just like never eat them. It's just they interfere with how you digest your foods. And if you eat toxins, those toxins get absorbed in your body and they have to go to the liver to get processed to get out of there. When the liver goes to process them, the liver wants to get rid of them. So the ideal place to put them is in the intestinal tract. And if they're small enough, they go to the kidney and then the bladder, and they all end up in the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
The thing
Well,
is that if it gets overwhelmed, those
yeah,
toxins go to blood, brain, bone, and fat. I mean, who wants that?
yeah, and it's awfully hard to detox all of that just through food. Do you have any other suggestions for people that may want to go through some detoxes and help them kind of right size their health and wellness faster?
Well, I think for one thing for sure, and I think I said it before, is that you don't want to purge. So there are products that I use from Metagenics. Um, is my primary detox. It's easy. It's incredibly affordable. And you get the shaker, you get the supplement, and you get the the pro the medical food that comes along with it. And I've used it for years. And I do it do it 2, 3 times a year, depending upon what my scores are on my assessments. And that's the determinant thing. It's like, how am I handling those toxins? And am I a candidate? And if I'm a candidate, then you have to have a gut that knows what to do with it. Because if the gut lining is damaged, then those toxins seep out into the blood. They do the liver thing, and the liver can't handle it, and it gets overwhelmed, and it goes to blood, brain, bone, and fat. It sounds like, oh my God, can you say something positive about it? Eat well, fix your gut, change your life.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to touch on before we finish up?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I love to see people, move, thrive, and live their life unapologetically. You can't do that if you're not well. And you don't think well if you're not well. It's just the gut brain connection is huge. So, I love to mentor. I love to see people do well. And, I work with people 24/7. And they have access to me. Anytime I'm working with somebody, they can call me in the middle of the night. As long as I hear the phone ring, I pick it up. Um, if not, I call them back as soon as I get up in the morning because I'm a very sound sleeper. And sleep is something I've never struggled with because I give up whatever's going on in the daytime before I go to bed, and figure it'll figure itself out. It's going to still be there in the morning, so I might as well get a good night's sleep.
Absolutely. Thank you, doctor. Appreciate your time.
I appreciate your time too.